Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to day 3 of the NWR Communications Small Cap Investor Conference. On the line today, we have Matt McFarlane from Icetana. Icetana is a global software company providing video analytics solutions which are designed to automatically identify anomalous actions in real time for large-scale surveillance networks. Icetana's software integrates with customers' existing video management systems and cameras, and it uses machine learning and artificial intelligence techniques to filter out routine motion and only show anomalous or unusual behavior. This lets operators focus on events that matter and respond in real time to both precursor activities and also incidents. Icetana has a broad range of use cases across a growing number of industry verticals. It's been implemented at more than 45 sites now on 4 continents. And presenting today, we have Matt McFarlane, who's the CEO of the business. Matt was the founding CEO of Icetana, and he returned to this role in September of 2018. He's a successful entrepreneur, angel and venture capital investor, and he worked for more than 10 years in international cross-border M&A. In 2018, Matt was recognised by the Western Australian IT and Telco Association as the PSE Entrepreneur of the Year. So I'll pass across to you in a moment, Matt. For any attendees on the line who would like to ask questions, you can submit them through the Q&A box at the bottom of your panel, and after Matt's presentation, we'll take them up there. So with that, I'll pass back to you, Matt. Go ahead.
Great. Thanks very much, and hi, everybody, and thanks for joining today. I'm going to whip through this presentation, and I look forward to your questions at the end. First up, we've got a bit of regulatory and legal. You can read all of that later. So just to repeat what was just said, what Icetana does, we're an AI video analytics company. We don't build cameras, we don't build hardware, we build software. And what that software does is it uses AI technology to analyze movement patterns in front of a security surveillance camera. And having gone through a 2-week period of learning typical movement patterns in front of the camera, it goes into monitoring mode and it starts to report abnormal or unusual movement in real time. We call this Icetana Motion Intelligence. The Icetana system complements existing video management systems. So the systems that control all these cameras and bring the feeds together and put them through to the storage capacity facilities. Those include the largest players in the market, Milestone and Genetec, that we've got very deep integrations with. And our solution has 2 main aspects. It removes noise, increases the efficiency and the likelihood of you finding interesting risk events in front of your surveillance cameras. But it also greatly increases the efficiency of the operators within the control rooms who are watching these. I'm going to take you through a brief overview of the key aspects that I'm going to touch upon today. First of all, this is a very serious and large unmet need, the requirement for real-time surveillance. I'll talk about that during the presentation. This is a very, very fast-growing and large global addressable market that we're working in. AI technology is going leaps and bounds ahead, and Icetana has been working in this space for 10 years now. That gives us an extraordinary advantage when we're going and pitching for opportunities in the current market, because we've got over 13,000 cameras globally using our solution with happy referring customers, and we've grown the number of customer sites dramatically during the course of this year, even under the pressures of COVID. We've got an experienced leadership team who have been doing a great job, if I say so myself, about managing our cash through this challenging COVID period, but also growing revenues at the same time. Plus, our business is transitioning very, very rapidly towards an increasing SaaS revenue share, which means we're getting recurring revenues, and we charge on a per camera basis. To give you an idea of the size of the market, we'll talk about just how many cameras there are out there in the world. It's also important to note that even though many of our customers have been suffering through COVID, none of them have cancelled their recurring contracts with us in the last 2 years, in fact. So we're very happy with our retention rates. It's a very sticky product once we get in place. All right, let's talk a little bit about existing surveillance operations and what some of the challenges are there. Many of you may not know this, but 98% of cameras are used only for recording. They're never actually watched in real time. And cameras, from a data perspective, are really interesting for AI because they produce enormous amounts of data. When you consider a 300 camera network, that's producing 26 terabytes of data every day. Generally speaking, that's more than what the corporate network and all the people producing emails and documents would do on their own system. So it's an enormous data producer surveillance networks. And there are far too many cameras out there for humans to watch. Now, there's a lot of people trying to address this problem so that, it's not as if we don't have any competitors, but the vast bulk of existing AI systems that are out there are retrospective focused. They look backwards rather than working in real time. They're rules-based. In other words, they're programmed to find specific problems. They might say, here's a tripwire. If something goes over this tripwire, then send me an alert. Here's a face I want you to match. If you match with facial recognition, then send me an alert. Those are rules-based systems. So they're very much, you want to find this, here's a system to find it. And also they tend to operate around object detection rather than events and behavior. Icetana differentiates ourselves from our competitors because we don't require rules. The system self-trains itself on existing cameras. We find a broad range of events and behaviors because our system is based upon exceptions rather than specific targeted events. We connect to existing cameras and systems, and it's very easy to implement our system. It takes very little time to set up, and the hardware costs make it extremely efficient. The processing that we do allows us to scale rapidly. One of the reasons I'm most excited about being CEO of Icetana is it's an enormous and fast-growing market. The video analytics market is forecast to grow at over 20% per annum and is already a multi-billion-dollar business. This is important because we are taking a slice of this pie, and the pie slice is getting bigger and bigger as time goes by. I'd also like to mention the way that technology advancements are going. So at the moment, we're in kind of somewhere around the middle of this chart. So early days, there was analog cameras. Those cameras have moved to IP technology, and there's dedicated video management systems to oversee them. And in the early days, there was just very limited monitoring going on, but gradually people have introduced rules, such as I talked about virtual tripwires, for example, or facial recognition detection. Number plate recognition is some of the advancements that are taking place. But as AI and machine learning goes further, you start to get context awareness, and you start to get understanding of what's going on within the scene. Icetana differentiates ourselves from our competitors because, to our knowledge, we're the only ones who are successfully doing anomaly detection based on motion globally. This is not as if we've got a whole bunch of competitors in this space. What are the results? Well, this is a sample of Icetana's black screen interface showing you what happens when, say, a 200 or 300 camera network starts to send its feeds through to a live wall, which is operating within a security operations center. Icetana throws up anomalies or unusual events in real time and catches the operator's attentions and draws their eye by popping up on the screen like this. Our system is an attention system, not an alert system. So operators are not expected to clear these alerts when they come up. They're expected to just take a glimpse, and then human intelligence is used to determine whether a response is required. It literally takes a microsecond for a human to look at these alerts as they come up and decide whether a response is required. If no response is required, which by the way is for the vast bulk of Icetana's alerts, then the operator simply ignores it and the alert will fade away, but be stored on the system for subsequent review if you really want to. So what types of events do we find? Well, there's a huge range of risk events that we've found over the last 10 years with our clients. These include crowds forming, fights breaking out, people being hurt with a trip fall, vandalism taking place, camera tampering, health and safety breaches, and even fires. Our offering has been, for the past 8 or 9 years, very oriented around discovering risk events. So, we're looking for those black swan events, those single things that will pay for the Icetana subscription for years to come. But recently we've discovered that there's also a really interesting sales pitch around the return on investment aspect. Icetana allows a single operator to monitor a very large number of cameras. And there are certain markets, particularly in guarding services and particularly in South America, for example, where active monitoring of surveillance cameras is a requirement. And we are finding a really, really interesting market opportunity where we greatly enhance the efficiency of those security operators who are monitoring those cameras. They go from typically monitoring, say, 60 cameras concurrently to 300 plus. And that's a huge step up in efficiency, which makes our sales process much faster. Much easier to sell a return on investment software product than it is to sell a risk software product. It's kind of the difference between selling something that enhances and improves your productivity versus selling insurance. This past year, we've had some payback from our strong focus on reseller-led distribution channels. Even through the course of COVID, you can see a whole bunch of brands here of various different reseller-led sales. They include operations in the US, in Japan, in Europe, across Australia, Singapore. So many, many different market locations. And retailers take quite a long time to build a relationship with. You can't just sign up with a reseller unless you've got some reference customers. It's taken us years to get to a point where these types of companies with strong brand names are willing to represent and put forward Icetana as a valid solution for their customers. Concurrent with that, we've also secured some direct sales as well. Let me just talk you through a typical customer for Icetana. So our typical customers will operate anything from 50 to 2,000 cameras on a single network. Those cameras go into what's called a security operations center, or a SOC, using the local sort of vernacular. And those security operations centers are generally operated either by the customer, who has prime responsibility for them, or they sometimes outsource them to a guarding services provider. These two customer target groups have very different requirements. The guarding services guys are interested in increasing their revenue, improving their efficiency, and being able to monitor more cameras in real time. The customer is most oriented around discovering risk events, protecting lives and property, and their reputation. Over the past 9 months or so, we've amended our go-to-market so that we recognize that with COVID, a number of our most successful verticals, so for example, university campuses, casinos, they were hit very, very hard by COVID. So we angled ourselves towards guarding services, and also industry segments where there was plenty of government funding and the risk argument is very, very strong. And that meant, for example, prisons. And we've had some great market momentum in the last 6 months, closing 10 new prison orders, as well as 2 strategic guarding services clients in the past 3 months. To give you context, that's an extraordinary turnaround, because our typical sales process prior to that was anything from 6 to 18 months between first contact and when we would get a purchase order. So things are turning around much faster for us with our current sales efforts. A quick mention of our board of directors. So sitting in the chair role is Mark Potts. He has extensive experience with Hewlett-Packard, and we've got a great governance board with lots of experience in the industry who take shareholder responsibilities very, very seriously. And a few moments just to talk about the executive team. I'd like to particularly call out Kevin Brown, who joined us from Virtual Gaming Worlds. Kevin's an extraordinary contributor to Icetana's future. He's very oriented around turning revenues that are reasonably small into revenues that are enormously large. When he joined VGW, they were doing $300 a day. By the time he left, 6 years later, they were doing $1.4 million a day. Kevin's transformed our technical operations and continues to drive very, very strong customer engagement and understanding of their requirements and pushing us towards very strong value-based pricing. Now, in the past 12 months, just looking at the last few quarters, our main focus has been good cost control through COVID. We didn't want to be in a situation where we ran out of cash and had to do a capital raise. And you'll see here that our spend per quarter has dropped dramatically over the past 3 quarters because we've increased our efficiency. And at the same time, we've continued to grow our order book and secured renewals from our existing customers. Our net cash flow has reduced very dramatically over the past 3 quarters. We don't expect that to continue. Obviously, there's diminishing returns, but we do expect that the revenues will continue to grow. That last chart on the right-hand side, the green bars, by the way, are renewals and orders coming through. That 4th column only represents between October and the 5th of November yesterday. So there's plenty more of the quarter left to go. Our growth strategy going forward is a mix of go-to-market developments. We're seeing a really interesting opportunity in the rebound from COVID. Sentiment has improved and orders are starting to flow again. People are understanding that this is the new norm and getting on with business. Our new vertical sectors, such as the prisons market and the guarding services market, are showing some really interesting positive signs. And we are extremely focused on growing our software as a service recurring revenue line, or annual recurring revenue line. That is complemented by our product roadmap, where we're going to get our customers to a wow event faster. In other words, we're working very diligently to avoid the long sales process where the customer takes a long time to get to the point where they say, oh my goodness, there's really interesting stuff happening in front of my cameras. We're doing a lot of really interesting product development to reduce that cycle so that the customers can within a matter of a week, decide, my goodness, this is something we want to have on Icetana. We're also building it that it's highly scalable for quick installation, and we're oriented very much around deep video management system integration to minimize the UI experience that we have to build and to rely upon the platforms that have been built by many other companies that are out there. We are a plug-in solution, not the core solution to video management. Now, a little bit about our capital structure. We've still got about 73% of the company in escrow situation. We did list just before Christmas last year. We've been trading reasonably flat in the kind of 10 to 15 cents range for a number of months now. And you can see how many shares are listed and the options that are in place, as well as the core shareholders. Now, I've just got a few sample slides I'll take you through, and then we'll dive into the questions. So this is a prison bakery. You'll see that he's just opened the door to the bakery, and that's given a burst of steam, which picks up an anomaly. And as that steam moves across the roof, it obscures the camera. And those are two events or instances that are very, very interesting in a prison context. If you see bursts of smoke in any context, you're probably going to be interested. But when cameras get obscured in prisons, it's often a sign that something nasty is going to happen shortly. The next example is also from a minimum security prison. If you watch the gentleman with the red jumper, he's come up to the television set with some contraband. This is a public area within a minimum security prison. And rather than have that contraband discovered in his cell, he's come to tuck it away behind the television set. This gives you an idea about how prisoners think about surveillance within prisons. They know that it's not being actively watched, and they know that they can get away with this type of behavior without being picked up. Icetana found a number of these events that are from the prisons from a trial that we did looking at simply 4 days of footage. So it was a really interesting trial that we did. Another example from the prison, again, this is a minimum security prison. So the cells actually have windows that can be opened. Have a look at the guys on the top floor. They're breaking into a fellow prisoner's cell. You think you might be safe in a minimum security prison, but obviously not. And going in to clear out whatever that prisoner might have had stored in his private space. We picked up a couple of instances of this during our trial. And this last example is an interesting one where we picked up workplace bullying. It shows that we pick up precursor events where threatening behavior is taking place, people doing a bit of the old argy-bargy and waving their arms around. This type of threatening behavior video is very, very interesting to retail centers and many, many workplace environments. You can see that this small guy is being pushed around a bit by a couple of larger guys. And that motion of them waving their arms about and being threatening, pushing them about is something that Icetana has picked up. And that gets me to the end of my presentation. I'm very happy to take any questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Matt. Very interesting videos. We've got plenty of food for thought there. We've had a few questions come in, so I'll jump straight in. Just as a reminder to everyone, you can submit questions through the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom panel. So Matt, is there an expectation that revenues might pick up once COVID restrictions settle in Australia and across the globe? And would that lead to the company becoming cash flow positive in 2021? Or would you view this as more likely to be sort of in 2022 and beyond?
Yeah, so we don't go too deep into forward-looking statements, but yes, in summary, I do expect that with COVID restrictions and a better understanding of COVID, we're already seeing movement in the market in terms of purchase orders and customers being more engaged with us. So I do expect that revenues will grow from where we've been operating to date. In terms of a cash flow positive situation, that certainly would be my goal towards the end of 2021. We've consistently said that our cash position is such that we can operate comfortably as we announced in the prospectus. So we don't expect to have to do a capital raise during 2021. But if we get signs of positive growth and we think that some additional capital will help us to accelerate that growth, we may consider that during the course of the year.
Thanks, Matt. Obviously, we were looking at prisons just at the tail end there. Can you talk to the potential size of the US prison market and how scalable Icetana's motion intelligence is for that market, and also how easily your products can integrate into new prisons?
Yeah, so we plug into pretty much any video surveillance network. We pick up a standard stream from the cameras. So the operations of those prisons don't necessarily have to have a particular video management system in place. In fact, the prisons that we've signed to date have a video management system that we have worked with before, but we're not taking the feeds directly from them. We'll be taking the feeds from the cameras. So integration into any prison environment is relatively simple for us. It's a challenging install because most prisons are air-gapped to the internet, and our system is very much premise. So we tend to prepare the server before it goes into the prison and then work on a very controlled manner with a local integrator to do the installation. In terms of the prison market, the state-based prisons that we've made this initial 6 orders with have, I think, a total of over 45 prisons operating within just that state. So when you consider that state has far more prisons than all of Australia, the market in the US is quite extraordinary. And that's only state-based prisons. I haven't even mentioned federal prisons or privately run prisons in the US. We do think that that state is a reference state for many other states in the US. So I haven't done the numbers, but the total prison market in the US is into the hundreds and hundreds for certain.
Indeed. Thanks, Matt. So looking beyond the prisons, is Icetana in discussions with airports, concert organisers, shopping centres, these sorts of end markets?
Yeah, so airports, that we have got a couple of leads in airports. We haven't had any success closing an airport customer as yet. In terms of, I think you mentioned shopping centres, there's a lot of engagement in shopping centres, and we have an excellent reference base in shopping centres. In fact, our shopping centres represent most of our sites. So we've talked about 45 sites. I think 22 of them are shopping centre locations. We have a very strong pitch for shopping centres. They have taken quite a hit with COVID, with being shut down and restricted numbers coming through, but we are seeing them starting to return. What was the other vertical that you mentioned?
The other one, so we had shopping centres, airports, and the other one, which is probably a bit more left field, is concert organisers, sort of live.
Oh yeah, concerts and stadiums. Yeah, so look, that's an interesting space, but we tend not to pitch for stadiums, concerts, or venues where there are flashing lights, or where, you know, they might have a Mariah Carey concert on a Tuesday night, and they might have a football game on a Saturday weekend. Because there isn't that consistency of movement, it tends to be a sector that we don't actively chase after, because with Icetana having learnt from the last 14 days of movement, it's expecting certain movement patterns to be taking place. So we tend to filter out those types of opportunities, but it's a very good question.
Yeah. So looking to the revenue, the comment that's come in has been that retention is very high. So how come revenue has gone backwards in the past 12 months?
Because we have a mix of recurring revenue and enterprise revenue. So historically, the business was very oriented towards enterprise revenue. That means that a customer will pay you, let's say, $500 a camera, and then a trailing software maintenance agreement, which might be anything from 15 to 20% of that $500 price. So you can see this very lumpy revenue where a large amount comes in, you recognize, and then you have a trailing software maintenance relationship. So your revenue can drop, 80% from a single customer year to year. And we have about 55% of our total revenue is recurring revenue, and the balance was made up of enterprise revenue. So we were hit a bit by that downturn where it wasn't topped up by recurring revenue last year. Does that explain it, I think?
I think it does, Matt. Thank you.
Okay.
And as far as your business model goes, what are the advantages of using resellers for your distribution rather than direct sellers?
Yeah, so look, salespeople are very expensive. It takes a long time for them to get up to speed. Resellers, you only pay them on success. We pay them anything from as low as 5% to up to maybe 25% commission if they're doing a really good job and turnkey. They also generate trust. So most of our resellers have long-term relationships with the customers that they're approaching. And when they go forward and propose Icetana, the company doesn't feel like they have to go through a big detailed diligence on the business or on the product because they have a trusted relationship with that reseller who's walked in the door. So we quite like that channel to market. It's quite a common channel within the security industry. And it means that at this point in our development, it makes a lot of sense to work together with those companies. I think, longer term, we may well want to have a direct pathway that's very low touch. And when our product is, the product enhancements that we're working on for a low touch, easy install type of a product, rather than this fairly complicated process with enterprise, as an enterprise software product now, we want to make that much smoother. We would expect to pivot towards some direct sales as well, and learn more about that as 2021 arrives and grows on us.
Thanks, Matt. And we have discussed a few of the different end markets and their attractions over the course of the Prezzo, but looking forward, what do you see as the key industry verticals for Icetana?
Look, aggregated guarding services companies I'm very interested in. So, we've got a number of sites around the world who bring in literally thousands of cameras from lots of different customers, and they're interested in providing real-time response to those customers. So if you've got a company who's already decided that real-time response is important, that's a really interesting pitch for me. The other area is, of course, prisons. We've had this early success. Very often you find in the enterprise software sales market, once you've got a particular vertical that you're doing well in, others get in touch with you. They tend to talk to each other quite a lot. So I'm interested in growing that. I think the casino market is likely to be reopening post-COVID. And we'll continue to work with our retail customers who are running retail malls globally.
Sounds good, Matt. Well, that concludes the Q&A component of the presentation. So really like to thank all attendees for their attention this afternoon, and thank you very much, Matt, for an illuminating presentation on Icetana. So I'll pass back to you, Matt, for any closing remarks.
No, I just want to say thanks very much for attending, everybody, and I hope to welcome you as an Icetana shareholder, or that you stay an Icetana shareholder. We've got our AGM in a few weeks, and yeah, please join us on this journey. We're very excited by it. All the best.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Matt. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll catch you again soon.